Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Good. Okay, we're going to have a debate now about creating a greener Britain. And to facilitate that, I'd like to hand you over to Helen from Ecotricity.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very, very much for coming over to listen to this debate or chat, however we've decided to call it. Welcome to WOMAD on behalf of Ecotricity. We're very proud to be here. And if you get the time, please do come and chat to people on our stand here. We'll be here, obviously, for the whole period here. The discussion today is very exciting. It's about Ecotricity's vision for a green Britain. And we've got some very interesting and inspiring guests, the chair being Jon Snow. I'm going to invite them on stage in a moment. The whole point of this is about you getting involved. So as you listen at the start to their discussions, if you can think of any questions, we're going to have roving mics. I'll have one. And there'll be another Dave over here. And we'll come through and allow you to ask the questions of the speakers. So the majority of it is about you being able to interact with those people on stage. At the very end, for all of you who've been here, I hope we have enough. We've got some goodie bags, very nice ones, that you're very welcome to pick up from the Ecotricity stall as you leave, and obviously have a chat with us. And we've got some rather cool badges as well, so if you haven't picked those up already, you're very welcome to. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our speakers onto stage, who are all looking at something entirely different. Time to come in, guys. Whoa! So Jon Snow, Dale Vince, who is founder of Ecotricity, Geetie Singh, founder of the Organic Pub in London, Duke of Cambridge, Simon King, and Robert Llewellyn. I'm going to hand you over to Jon now. Thank you, Jon.
I don't think any of us agreed to come here without being absolutely certain there wouldn't be anybody around at 10:30. But then, as we were discussing at the back, it's an older demography, an older festival demography, and therefore potentially much more capable of going green. But this debate is really about putting the great back into Britain in a green circumstance. I mean, the whole idea is really what would it take to turn Great Britain green? I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing to look at the statistics and recognize how far behind virtually every European country we are. I mean, way behind Germany, for example, and they lost the war. I confess that I aspire to be green, but not as green as I should be, but at least I ride a bike. But there are so many ways in which one could be so much greener. I'm going to introduce our panel here. Dale Vince, where are you, Dale? He's here. This is Dale. He is the architect, founder, absurdist who dreamt up the idea of Ecotricity. This event is sponsored by Ecotricity, and I can even declare that I'm a long-term customer of Ecotricity. I just couldn't put up with any of the other six. And actually, it's a dreamboat of an operation. You can't use that. I'm not allowed to advertise. So Robert Llewellyn on the end here, who doesn't really need any introduction at all. He's acting in Red Dwarf, presenter of Scrap Heap Challenge, and recently in the online series of Fully Charged. He is a massive, huge electric car nut, whether that means huge electric cars or that's just the way it's written down here. I did see the latest Tesla the other day, which is a huge electric car, but must indeed be a huge price. But we'll be talking about electric cars in a moment and whether they are really the future or not. Geetie Singh-Watson is founder and managing director of the Duke of Cambridge, an organic pub in Islington in London. She's an activist in the world of getting good food on the table at all. And Simon King is a wildlife photographer presenter whose insights into changes in wildlife populations and impacts that have occurred over the last few years. I indeed did a piece myself the other day about the barn owl, which is not yet in a completely endangered condition, but which is being affected. And I found out about hedgehogs while I was doing it. Hedgehogs have gone from 37 million in the 1950s to 1 million today, and that's us. That's the failure to tackle the way in which we live. I'll just tell you one other thing. which I discovered the other day. I was out in the Outer Hebrides looking not at green energy, but looking at the vote, the independence vote. And I was staggered to wander around the windiest part of the whole of Great Britain, Harris and Lewis, where there's fabulous arrays of wind farms, but to see that in every array of 8 or 6, 2 or 3 of the blades would be, 2 or 3 of the actual turbines would be idle. And then I discovered that it's generating so much electricity, they've failed to put in enough connector to take it off the island. So the island of Harris and Lewis could produce twice as much as they produce already, which is the most by any landmass anywhere in this part of Europe, but can't because the idiots never did what they said they would do 12 years ago, and it's now held up because they don't know whether it's going to be an independent Scotland generating the electricity or us. So there we are. And so what I'm going to ask each of our victims to suggest is to conjure a vision of the Britain they'd like to see and how we'd like to get there from the perspective in which they particularly live. So I'm going to start with you, Robert, seeing as you are the sponsor of this event.
No, Dale's the sponsor.
Dale, I mean. Dale, it's going to start. I just got off a plane, so I'm slightly off the rocket. Go for it. A very ungreen plane.
No, you.
Where are we? You start, Dale. It's you.
Okay.
It's you.
I only
It's
have
you.
to do it once.
It's you, Vicar.
You can tell we rehearsed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dale.
Well, for me, the three big themes are energy, transport, and food. And that's because 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint is within those three areas of life. And they're the things that we choose to spend our money on, so they're within our control. We don't have to wait for governments or big companies to do something about that. We at Ecotricity primarily work in energy, but we extended our mission to include transport and food a few years ago, just because we think it's a kind of it's a joined-up vision of what we need to tackle. In all three of these sectors, we need to use less, and what we do use, we need to get from sustainable sources. So it's simply a matter of how we heat and light our homes, how we travel, and what we choose to eat. Not so much where it comes from, but what we choose to eat makes the biggest difference. So my vision of a green Britain is one where we all tackle those three things. And make room for nature, I should say the fourth, make room for nature.
Well, those are very aspirational. How would you deliver them? Do you use taxation as a mechanism? Do you use inspiration, organic appeal?
Well, I think taxation is a good weapon to incentivize people to do things and companies to produce products. Inspiration, I think, is a great way to get things done, and people power above all, I believe, is the best way to get things done. And so a key part of our message is that the power is in all of our hands, in all of our pockets, quite literally, because 80% of the problems, fossil fuel depletion, climate change, you name it, they're all one and the same thing, are driven by the things we choose to spend our money on. So it's about informing people about the choices that they make and can make, and providing alternatives, as we do in our core mission with Ecotricity. We offer green electricity and gas. In transport, we built the electric highway, which is a national network of fast chargers. And in food, really, we just campaign to inform people about the difference
How
they
fast
can make.
is fast?
Fast is 20 minutes to about
Charge a whole electric car, or
a whole one, yeah.
not just put another 10 miles in.
No, that's right. In a Nissan Leaf, I think you get probably 80 or 90 miles in 20 minutes, which is the time it takes to have a cup of coffee at a motorway service station. And by the end of this year, we'll have done every motorway service station in Britain with one or two fast chargers. So you can go anywhere in Britain in a car, electric car.
Well, Robert, that leads us pretty seamlessly on to you. I mean, there is a prejudice that believes in some way the electric car is A, inordinately expensive, and B, charging it is an immense problem because there aren't enough charging points, and anyway, then it takes all night to do it.
Yes, in 1995, that was an absolute spot-on observation.
That's the era I live in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was a wonderful period. I think the key thing is, one of the important things to remember with cars in general, is there's too many of them. They're an enormous economic burden on all of us. I'm not being specific about any type of car, but the most important thing is 90% of all the cars in the world at this moment, 90% are not doing anything. Which is very good, because if they all were, we'd be in a right old pickle.
Can I just pause you there, because we could try something quite interesting here. It only applies to anybody under 35. So, of course, there's not very many of them here. But How many people under 35 either don't have a driving license at all or anyway rarely if ever drive? Hands up.
Yes, look at
that. That's a really interesting, very interesting event.
Yeah. I think it's a 72% drop of under 20-year-old men applying and taking driving lessons. My daughter, who's 18, can drive. My son, who's 21, can't and isn't interested and isn't going to learn. And he never will. He's not, why would you? Well, there's no point. He lives in Bristol. He rides a bike.
Well, that is a huge societal shift.
Yeah, and it's really worrying motor manufacturers a great deal. But all I was going to say...
But it's not worrying governments who don't want, in fact, to make any provision for either cycling, pedestrianisation or anything else. They're rigidly opposed. I don't know why. Yeah,
well, because you can't make money. It's very hard to make money out of cycling, very easy to make money out of particularly fossil fuels. Very hard to make money out of electricity, and it's a big problem for them because they can't tax electricity.
What sort of electric car? Well, you have many electric cars by the sound of it.
My own one is parked here, and it's a Nissan Leaf, which Dale just mentioned. And
how far have you been dogged by thinking, now, will I be able to get from here back to X and then on to Y without charging it?
Oh, without charging? Not at all, because those journeys I'll go, I know the distances.
Yeah. But there's not a motorway service station on the way with a...
To here? Well, no, I will go back just because I think I should to Forest Green Rovers, which is in Stroud, a huge distance of 12 miles, and plug in Nailsworth. Okay, sorry. Gosh, yes. I said Stroud. It's not Stroud, it's Nailsworth. And Nailsworth is a lovely town with some lovely coffee shops and really good cakes.
Does it have any charging points?
It has a charging point. It has a rapid charger. So I'll plug it in there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then drive home. So, I mean, it's not... so it depends where you're going.
And how does the cost of your car compare with,
Well, that's... Okay, the car... I bought this right when it first arrived in the country. So it's the Japanese make. It's not as good as the new one that's made in Sunderland. It's really annoying. I'm an early adopter. Or an idiot, whichever way you want to look at it. And so I've done 42,000 miles in my car, and it's cost under £600. So you just have to do a bit of maths to work that out. But 42,000 miles in something like a very economic, similar-sized car, a Volkswagen Golf or a Ford Fiesta, would cost you about £3,500, £4,000 in fuel. So there is a massive, massive, game-changing, economically disruptive difference in the cost. So my car cost way more than a Ford Fiesta when I bought it, but it is now way cheaper than a Ford Fiesta because that gap has been closed by... So you've got to do about 40 or 50,000 miles in an electric car.
Will it have a second-hand value?
I don't think... Oh, yes, it does. Yes, and it's it's very good for people who want to buy an electric car now. There are quite cheap second-hand things like...
As you've already explained, they're just not as good as the present ones.
Mine isn't as good, no. So that's why it's cheap. So the first generation Nissan Leaf, you want to buy them, they're really good. It's not, but the new ones are better.
Okay, fine.
The new ones are just, when I've driven the new ones, and it's annoying because they are better.
I have no doubt we have not heard the last of your electric car, and we'll come back to it. Geetie, food.
Okay, well, I'd like to see Britain producing as much of our food as we can seasonally and organically. I'd like to see our government change their attitude to organic farming and starting to support and encourage organic farming. I'd like to see most of all public procurement to be organic and sustainably sourced. So imagine if we did schools, prisons, hospitals, it would have a dramatic effect on our landscape and on the food we produce in this country and our wildlife. And give the opportunity for people in hospitals, prisons and schools to be eating really healthy food and to give them, be a really opportunity to educate them. I don't know about choice, though. We talk about people choosing how they buy food. It's kind of... on the one hand, I feel very heartened by it. I've had my pub for 15 years, and I've seen a sea change in people's comprehension of organic food, sustainable fish, seasonality, locality, however I say that. But actually, people still choose to buy rubbish. And back here, I know I said I wouldn't say this, but I'm going to. There's Walker's Crisps and Nescafe coffee. And here we are at WOMAD Festival, trying to be great, and at the big green debate being offered absolutely crap food. That's choice.
Is the non-crap food available, in all honesty, in economically feasible amounts?
Absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You can buy, if you buy a veg box or go to a local farmer's market, you can spend less money on fresh fruit and vegetables than you will in supermarkets, easily.
But
particularly if you're
buying on an industrial scale for schools, prisons, as you suggested, is there enough organic to go around?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's taken a bit of a hammering of late. Some people have been getting out of organic. I think somebody in the Archers has just given up organic pigs.
God knows what's happened in the Archers. It won't last, I promise. Well, we've had a decrease in organic production in Britain. We are the only country in Europe that has seen a drop in our market share of about 4% in Britain, and it's a real tragedy. But the rest of Europe is growing up to 17%, and that is because governmental support of organic food. Rather than I don't know, the NFU and the organic movement, they seem to be at loggerheads with each other, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be working together to change our food production. There's no reason why they shouldn't be working together to see it as positive steps towards each other.
What do you think the premium is on your pub providing organic food as opposed to buying it non-organic? What do you think?
It's a really interesting question. You know, I was talking about this yesterday with Guy about whether or not we should do some research into the difference between what it costs me to produce our food, which is 100% organic, it's seasonal, and it's local. So nearly all our veg come from around London, and it is seasonal, which is incredibly unusual. Virtually no one does it. But my prices are comparable to any other good gastropub in Islington, and my margins are comparable.
No, I'm not thinking about the prices. I'm just thinking about what you have to pay in a sense as a premium to buying raw your stuff before you feed it to the customers.
Some of it is phenomenally more expensive. For example, our sunflower oil can be up to 6 times the price of non-organic. Most restaurants are using GM sunflower oil, by the way, so you should always ask where your sunflower oil is from.
Excuse me, waiter, could you just let me know, where does the sunflower oil come from?
Is it GM, the question should be? Of course it should.
I come from Portugal. I don't think I can answer that question.
Don't be facetious, John. but
Good thing we've got a woman on the panel.
But there's plenty of other ingredients. If you're buying seasonally, if you're buying locally, that can be a lot cheaper. Not necessarily locally, but definitely seasonally. You've just got to run a bloody good, tight business. You know, and think about that as being part of your values of your business. Waste less food. We waste 1/3 of the food we produce. You know, we don't need to produce more food if we deal with our food waste.
I just thought of one more thing. Polytunnels, enabling the season to be extended.
Yeah.
You all right with that?
Yeah, I think it's fine, actually.
So you could go right almost through the year without looking very seasonal?
I don't think you could go through the year, no, not at all, but you can extend seasons. The important thing is that you don't use heat in greenhouses. Mm-hmm. So we do buy from polytunnels, but we don't buy from heated greenhouses. Transport, well, you know, we try and buy local food, and I am not saying that's necessarily better, because some of my little farmers in their clapped-out old vans, it's not a good thing, really. So I'm slightly compromised on that. There's a lot to be said for articulated lorries charging around the country, delivering in a very efficient, energy-efficient way. But it depends how we transport food. It really does. That's the important thing, is how it's transported. Is that right?
We now have to move on to the other elements of life that live on this planet with us, and that's your expertise. And what could we do to share the planet more equitably?
Well, funnily enough, so much of what has already been said contributes to just that, because it's the net effect of all of our actions that has resulted in what last year was shown with the State of Nature report to be a 60% decline in the species studied in the United Kingdom. Now, I'm not sure how many of you were aware of this, because it didn't really make the headlines it should. Many of you, I'm sure, are engaged and do know about it. But the very fact that over the past 50 years, 60% of the species that were studied, and this is over 3,500 species, were shown to be in serious decline in this country. And of those, 10% were shown to be threatened with extinction. I find that deeply shameful because it's on our watch. I find it personally deeply embarrassing because it's on my watch, and I'm one of the people who's supposed to be shouting from the ramparts that we should all care. We should care about the intrinsic value. We can talk about environmental services, and that's what certain people would have us do, and to put a price tag on everything. And yes, it might open a door into certain corporate environments, but quite frankly, it is about the intrinsic value of life that is all around us. Not just, of course, for the sake of a butterfly's own existence, but for our own, for our very own, not just everyone sitting here, but our kids. If we were to look to what is now a British Isles, which, if I look, I've just passed the half century, I'm 51, and if I look back to being...
Don't look here.
Thank you. About 83, I know, didn't say it. But I can look back at being 12 years old on the Somerset levels, and at that time, it was absolutely normal to be listening to lapwing displaying over almost every field, to see snipe drumming and hear them drumming overhead, to see hares. I used to go to the levels when I was 17 to film hares when I first started making wildlife films, because it was one of the best places in the British Isles to do so. And the same for barn owls and many other birds and creatures. And I go there now, and yes, there are bastions of beauty. There really are, and they are the reserves. Great reserves like Shapwick Heath, West Hay and others, and down on Sedgemoor. But by and large, it is one big green desert. And one can point many fingers, and I think that the danger here is to point the fingers at farmers and the farming industry. But what effectively this is about all of us. It's about what Dale and Geetie were saying. It's about how we spend our money. And if we are not prepared to, if you look at just simple statistics, if you look back at post-war spend on how much we would spend on food, it was about 50% of household income. That's how much we spent on the food that went on the table. And now it's around 11%. And we still whinge. And we still put... So as long as there's this voice, and I include all of us in this, as long as there is this voice saying to the producer, the farmer, we want it, we want more of it, and we want it for less, then the only thing that can give is everything else. And it will break. Well, it's already broken. I haven't heard a turtle dove singing in Somerset now, which makes me weep, for about 15 years. Nightingales were relatively common, and they've all but gone. However, there is hope. There really is. And I've seen rewilding projects, relatively small scale, where nightingales in the British Isles have returned. They haven't just been there and held on. They have come back. Red kites are a great example of a bird which is, with our direct assistance, been encouraged to return. But I'm talking about organic return. It's not simply a question of us having to manage each and every species as an individual. It's a question of, if you like, the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And it is if you give them room, if you give our natural neighbours room, they will come. But we have to do it in a way which is sustaining for both the natural... I hate using the word natural world as a separatist phrase. It's not. We're part of it. We are part of this system. But we have to embrace that fact, as I say.
What no one's mentioned is... What no one's mentioned is politics, and I would argue as an objective observer that we're observing the greatest alienation from the political classes at any age, really probably since the Second World War. There are many, many people now who are regarded as something sludge that doesn't really kind of connect with any of the issues and interests that they actually have. It seems to me this is the greatest possible moment, the green movement and those that wish to green Britain. I actually have even woken up in the morning and thought madly that the next election might be the greenest we've ever known.
Well, I sincerely hope so, but I want to know who we are going to vote for.
Shall I tell you, I'm not advocating you vote for anybody in particular, because just like not advertising Ecotricity, which is an absolutely terrific organisation. I'm also not allowed to espouse any sort of hope for anybody. But I would say perfectly objectively that Caroline Lucas is one of the very, very best. And yet actually her seat is seriously endangered because of the collapse of all the others, because they kind of, it's all going awry. And the alienation expressed by the people who vote for UKIP and some of the people who vote for the yes vote in Scotland is a great describer of a hunger for something which connects with what people are really, really interested in, which is really preserving the planet for their children. Robert.
I was only going to say that the debate, as far as I can see it, does fall between two stools. You're either more frightened multinational corporations, or you're more frightened of government. And that is the left-right split, as it was in my youth. It was you were on the left or the right and all that stuff. It's completely gone. So do you believe corporations run governments, or do you believe that governments crush the human spirit and force us into a thing? And I mean, it's very hard. The more I've learnt about the big corporations, particularly the energy corporations and the fossil fuel industry, is that their influence over government, not just individual members of government, but the civil service, the whole structure of our government is enormous. It is colossal. It is funded with money that we can't even imagine. You know, that Greenpeace can raise £5,000 at an event and use that to publicise something. Meanwhile, Exxon use $27 billion a year on the United States government to influence them. They will be doing likewise here. And that's a very difficult thing not to become a tin hat wearing conspiracy theorist nutbag, which I really try and avoid. But every now and then bits of information come in about the influence that those companies have. And that isn't, and I don't think it's wrong. I fully support fossil fuel industries arguing their case. It's their job. That's what they do. They make money. What I think is a good idea is for us to, as fast as we can, stop buying their products and aim our financial power in the direction that we want. And it's a really it's not easy. It's a difficult choice, because I didn't even know this, but the Koch brothers, I think you're supposed to say Coke, but I prefer Koch. They own the Lycra company, the company that makes Lycra. I've got Lycra cycling shorts. I've supported the Koch brothers directly through my purchases. Understanding how the corporate world works is incredibly tedious and boring, and I can't be bothered, but we have to be bloody bothered. It's really important.
I
bet you've got Lycra.
I do have, but I haven't worn it for a long time. Once again, not out of any real green sensitivity, but just thinking I don't look too good in it.
No. It is known as the cruelest cloth.
It is. Yeah. But Dale, seriously, it might just be a good moment, without giving your company a puff, just to talk about the biology of what is happening in what one could call the fringe providers. After all, you're very small. I know that's not a nice thing to say, because 120,000 customers. How many?
130,000.
130,000 customers is not enormous, but it's twice what it was the year before. Yeah. So just tell us, what are you reading into that? What are you reading into that?
Well, it really kicked off last October when there was a bit of a media frenzy, and it felt like the government, the media, and the public turned on the Big Six in a bigger way than we'd ever seen before. And the numbers of people joining us went up by Christmas nearly tenfold every month. There was an avalanche of customers and sustained itself for about 6 months. It's gone quiet over the summer. It's only 4 times what it used to be now. We expect it to pick up again in October and go mad again. And I think people are just fed up with rubbish customer service, being ripped off, with multinational transfer pricing, whereby the Big Six don't pay tax in this country. 2/3 of them are foreign owned. One of them's owned by the French government. That's EDF in London. And everybody's very fed up with the energy sector.
And Geetie, how do you read Tesco? Because, I mean, Tesco used to be untouchably massive, not a desirable situation, but it's hit the buffers.
Nationalise the supermarkets, and then we could have complete control over everything that's sold.
Before you get there, I mean, what about the growth of Lidl and the demise of Tesco? What do you think is happening? That's not about organic. It's about price.
It's about people trying to shop cheaper in a more efficient way. But there's also been, really interestingly, through the recession, a growth in box schemes and farmers' markets and independent shops. And that is people making a political decision and how they're spending their money on food. And it's incredibly exciting. And, we all have the choice in how we spend our money on food and energy. And the Dale is a fantastic example. And all the box schemes and independent shops are a fantastic example of how we can change the way our country operates. It's a political decision how we spend our money. Eating is an agricultural act. We can change our landscape through how we choose to spend our money on food, and every single decision on how we spend our money on clothes will change. If we're buying organic cotton, it's going to have a dramatic effect all over the world. And it's all there. There's no reason why we should be. There are going to be some things like your lycra shorts that are going to slip through the net, but we could have a really...
We got rid of a net in favour of chamois leather, to be honest. I'm not sure how the biology of this next moment is going to occur, but basically it's your opportunity now to get the debate shifting in whichever direction you want to go. And I haven't lost the large hat down there, which has a lot to say about organic food. But would you like to pick up the baton? Are we a one microphone situation? And one over there, right. Yeah, there's a very nice hat there that wants to ask a question too. So why don't you go, yeah.
Okay, question for Dale. You touched on politics, John, and Dale, I just think it's absurd that EDF, French government-owned energy firms, should be supplying the British government ministries with energy. And do you have any plans for pitch for government energy as a customer in the run-up to the next election?
No. No, we're kind of really focused on reaching out to people and, people that kind of get what we're doing. But this government doesn't get what we're doing. And we're not really interested, I think, in trying to have them become a customer for a short-term political gain for them, perhaps. There'd be no long-term
Do you get any
purpose in it.
favourable tax relief or anything?
No tax relief that's particular to us, to the green industry.
Despite the fact that you're kind of developing further inroads into it?
No. I mean, in the time of this government, building windmills, which is primarily what we do, has just become much harder. The success rate of planning applications for wind halved, and then Eric Pickles called in just about every wind application himself personally to turn a whole bunch more down. And support for wind and solar has been cut successively over the last 3 years. So everything has become actually harder under this government when it comes to building sources of green energy.
Thank you very much for a good question. Berwick Street Fair Trader. Is that you or just the sweatshirt? Is that you? What is a Berwick Street Fair Trader?
We're in Berwick Street, Soho. The market is a very poor street, has a very famous reputation. So we've started the process of putting organic, vegan and eco-sustainable materials back onto the market, and we're trying to raise the funds from local...
Just meat or...
No, it's not meat at all. It's things that will fly off Berwick Street markets. That has to be relevant to the market's history. So fabrics and foods do fly, but not necessarily meats, because that's not a big thing on Berwick Street market.
I'd come there if I could get my bike down there on a busy morning.
We'll repair your bike for you.
And can I just add one thing? And we're supporting small businesses, and together we stopped a Sainsbury's local moving in and was going to close all the small shops down, and it was our petition that stopped that. So
that's good. That's very interesting. I was approached to sign up to campaign against Sainsbury's local in a village area of London that I don't actually live in, but did once. And so I've got in under the wire and also signed up to keep it local. Hat.
Hello, I'm Chris Philpott, author of a book on green spirituality, and I extensively and intensively research spiritual traditions. And
no advertising.
I'm advertising. Value systems in relation to the environment. But the point I want to make is I think there needs to be a bit bigger debate about the values that we hold that motivate us to buy anything in the first place. And I think spiritual values, or those values, are more important than selfishness and greed and materialism, which is what the capitalist system encourages. I think we need to question ourselves. And personally, I'm a Buddhist, and I look at whatever I do, and I try to engage in my community, community-supported agriculture, buy organic, and ride electric bike with good energy, I'm afraid, powering it. So I just wonder what the panel thought, that there's not enough debate about values generally, about what motivates people to do things.
We need to consume less. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I'm not sure entirely where the debate about values is taking place. I think it is a lot in business, actually. I think you'll find that, I find a lot of businesses are being very informative. So, and it is, so that's a confusing message in itself, isn't it? I think most youth would say that's where they're getting their debate about values from. What do you think, Dale?
Very good. Simon?
Okay. Whatever you describe it as, spiritual or otherwise, what I was referring to earlier, i.e. the intrinsic value of life, is only something, and I believe absolutely, that you can achieve if you engage with it. And one of the things we have most definitely seen in the past 30, 40 years is a separation between most of Western urban humanity and what I describe as the real world. Now, that might have been the case that your only connection with the real world was to play footy in the street and to scuff your knees, or to get up your neighbour's apple tree to go scrumping. But it was still a very real connection. And I think that what undoubtedly has been happening is that more and more people have not got the capacity to love the real thing simply because they don't know it. And I'm a great advocate of trying to get everybody, regardless of age, to just get outside and to be a part of whatever that space is, and to ensure that those spaces exist, not simply in the great green Britain beyond the city, but within the city as well. There is so much opportunity to do that, so much opportunity.
But, Robert, at the danger of sounding cynical in any way, isn't the way forward to appeal to what is actually good for them, and actually, irrespective of spirit, this will lead you to having a better conditioned body?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, the difficulty, I guess, you have is the complexity and the power of the mass media, which is an important thing, and that is being powerfully disrupted by people who, I can't think of any other way of describing it. YouTube, the fact that there is a whole, this has affected my living because I worked in television for many years, and it has changed a lot. You're lucky you still got a gig, mate. I have got a couple of gigs brewing, but anyway, that has changed radically, and I think much for the better. I think it's a massive improvement that there isn't now one voice coming at us, that we've got a massive choice there. But I mean, I think one of the things I wanted to say about that, I'm getting a stronger and stronger feeling of a combination of, in a sense, technology and spirituality. That there are people I know, engineers and scientists, who are working on technologies that are exquisitely, delicately aware of the impact that technology has on the environment, and their awareness of that has changed their whole attitude. So they're not just making new stuff for us to buy. And one of the big things I think is the most interesting thing, strange enough, was a BMW car advert. So you can't think of anything more corporate and massive than BMW make cars. The beginning of their advert said, "There's too many cars, we can't all own cars."
Now, there's so many hands that we're going to sort of take a bit of a raft now. The nice orange top, and then if you'd pass the microphone to the man in the blue shirt and the straw hat in front of you diagonally, and then we're going to come to this one, and then if you'd hand it to the man on the mobile tractor over there. Right.
Hello. Okay, my question is really regarding the sustainability of electric cars, because I'm concerned about the batteries that are being used, and second-hand electric cars, from what the information I can find, aren't very good, because the batteries are actually worn out after a few years. So I'm finding it very difficult.
Sorry, thank you.
I'm finding it very difficult to find information about whether the current batteries in cars mean that they can go on for 10, 15 years, or whether the batteries are actually, which are one of the most expensive parts of electric cars, actually wear out after about 5 years. So I'm not really sure how sustainable electric cars are.
Very good question.
Okay. In comparison to fossil fuel cars, it's embarrassing how sustainable they are. So the car I've done has done 42,000 miles. Batteries are at 97.2% of their original capacity after 42,000 miles. So after 80,000 miles, let's say 93%. After 100,000 miles, maybe 80%. Still work, still perfectly functional, but you haven't got the same amount of range. The truth is, no one knows. And that immense amount of information that was pumped out at us through, I'm going to say his name, Mr. Clarkson, who said we'll just throw the batteries away after 2 years and we'll throw them into landfill. They have enormous secondary use. So when they're not powerful enough to run a car a decent distance, companies like Ecotricity will be very keen to reconfigure those batteries to use them in a domestic circumstance where you have a small battery in your house that will then last for 10, 15, 20 years. After that, 95+% of the materials in that battery are recyclable. So I'm saying 25 years useful life, and then we use all that material again.
But Robert, she's really, the lady in orange is really opening up a much more radical question than that, I think, and that is, do people need cars anymore anyway, in the sense that car sharing, although it's cumbersome at the moment.
That's the most important part of the whole debate, is car sharing.
In fact, no individual really requires a car.
No, 90%.
With the possibility of
if your car is not being used 23 hours a day by you, and who does that, then it's a waste. Don't buy a car, don't own a car, use a car sharing club. And electric cars lend themselves to that enormously, and European cities are way, way ahead of us on that.
And the second issue that is raised by that is that there are whole areas of Britain which should be removed from access to motor vehicles altogether, other than for deliveries during the dark hours. I mean, for example, you could start with London, and you could say no private cars at all between Park Lane and the Thames, between the bank and, you could get a very big square. Obviously, disabled people and maybe some people who lived around there, though thankfully not very many, might be excused. But it seems to me we've made no progress at all on that front, at all. And if anything, car sales are still going up.
They are, yes. But
there is progress, Berwick Street. Yeah. Yes. Yes, it's true. Yeah. I'll repeat the answer. He said there is some progress in that car sharing entities are pushing availability and the rest of it, but it's still a very cumbersome job. Yeah. Okay. Because they can't hear you, I'm not going to sort of pursue it any further, but I'll take the man on the tractor there. Yes, sir, keep going. Microphone coming. And then we'll come back to you, sir. Sorry about that. So, Helen, if we could go back to where you began in a moment, that'd be brilliant. And then there's another question over here with the straw hat. Straw hat actually did come before you, so straw hat first.
Thank you. I agree with John's point you made earlier about that there seems to be a momentum towards people voting Green. And of course, here in the southwest, we did return our first MEP at the last European elections. And I just wonder what you think needs to happen for the Green Party to make an electoral breakthrough, particularly at the next general election.
Very good question. I'm going to park that and take your question, sir.
We're talking about building a new economy, a green growth economy. And it seems to me that you make change in the world by leading from the bottom, not from the top. Real change, as I think, I've seen it in the international development sphere. Real change happens from the bottom, from community level, and it's really people at community level that make a change.
Very good. Yeah.
Building. Creating a leadership for sustainability, finding a way to build confidence of people at community level to make change, I think is a really important factor. And it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about food or electric cars or whatever. It's about building up the confidence of people at community level to feel that they can actually make a change. And I don't know how. I have never seen anybody here address that on this stage.
How many people here know the names of all their next-door neighbours in the house either side of where they live? Well, the whole street. You can't be living in London then. It's pretty impressive, actually. There's still a lot of community to be used for good purposes. Okay, who wants to answer either of those two excellent questions? Go on, go cooking.
Well, what we're going to do to get people to vote for the Green Party, what I'm finding really depressing is that every time I see UKIP speak, I feel disturbingly impressed by their behaviour. They are challenging the media. They're challenging the way politicians play with with journalists, and they have this kind of pact between them where they play these ridiculous games, and UKIP just cuts right through it and talks in a really matter-of-fact way. I'm not agreeing with anything that they're saying, but maybe if we could get the Green Party or an alternative party to be as real as that and to cut the shit and start behaving as people want them to behave, we'd have an alternative.
I think from our observations, the truth of the matter is that if you look at the other three party leaders and then you look at Farage and you're asked to have a pint with one of them, you'd say, well, not the other three. I probably could cope and could have a good argument with, because probably we'd get him pissed in the end, with Farage. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that seems to me to be the problem. Very, very big problem. And the media is also very, very resistant to looking at other forces that are on the move. And they've all preferred to look at UKIP above the Greens, which is sad. There is a person here who is well under 35. How old are you?
12.
12, good. Yes, let's hear it from you.
Okay, can I just ask, how many people here have a laptop or a desktop computer? How many of you run Windows, any version, Windows XP, 7, 8? And how many of you know about WatchOS?
One.
Good. Basically, WatchOS is basically these clever people have used the Linux kernel, and it's based on Debian, to create WatchOS. It's basically...
Hold up. You better take us through that one a little more
Okay.
slowly. A lot of people... Just tell us what both those programs are.
Okay, basically Linux is a kernel, and you can build an operating system like Windows XP or Windows 7 on top of it.
To do all the things that
Yeah,
Windows
but it can do all the stuff Windows 7 or
Right.
8 can do.
Right.
Anyhow, basically WatchOS, they've managed to make, really cleverly, a really power-efficient, CPU-efficient operating system. So basically, suppose you have one of the big 6 energy companies, and you don't want to have to use too much of that energy which is being made by burning coal or something. When you use WatchOS, basically, you're not using as much energy. It's very, very efficient, meaning you can do the same stuff on Windows, well, not all of it, because there's not many programs for it, but you can do it very, very efficiently.
That's a very interesting contribution. So if you go home and think, what was he talking about? I better Google that. Just think, what-ho Jeeves, and go to what-ho.
Another thing.
Yeah.
Another thing about WatchOS is that, what was it? Oh, yeah. Linux magazine called Linux Developer and User, they tested WatchOS, and through all their testing, they realized that they hadn't dropped a single % in battery life. That's something to be proud of.
Very impressive. Thank you very much.
For those who don't want to switch to Windows 8, it's a lot more like XP.
Yeah, how do you spell it? Is it W-A-T-O or? W-A-T-T-O-S. Wattos. Wattos. But as you say, there are not very many programs for it yet. But you're busy writing them. Sorry, Helen, where are we? Yeah.
Hi. I live in Nailsworth, and I'm going to advertise here because I can walk to Forest Green Rovers, and I recommend it to everyone. It's a great experience, and except we're hoping for better football this year. What I wanted to ask about was supermarkets. In Nailsworth, actually, we don't have a large supermarket, so we have a lot of independent shops. And I wanted to ask about the Tesco tax, as it was called, that we read about yesterday, where the local government saying that they would like to impose a tax on large supermarkets. And I wondered what the panel thought, how likely that would be. And then the second part of it is, what can we do to help that happen?
I guess that's me. That sounds... God, you know, they're saying quite a lot at the moment, Tories, around food, aren't they? They started talking about public procurement this week as well. I'd be really surprised if they follow through on any of it. I think they're trying to please and appease and try and capture a few more votes again. But it would be a great thing if they were taxing large supermarkets. It would be far better if we had continuous support for the high street. So maybe tax relief in some form or another for independent shops. Yeah, that's it, I think.
There might be one very interesting sidebar development, which is the growth of the GARC donor. The GARCs have nothing to be said for them except they have a great deal of money. But the fact that they're now beginning to fund the political parties means that there's not much less space left for supermarket chains and the rest of it to exert their pressure on parties. And there's a thought. Out of evil cometh good. Yes.
If I could just pick up briefly on current politics without wishing to slip into party political discussions. I'm sure many of you are currently aware of there being a draft infrastructure bill in place. If you're not, you should be, because it's going on under the radar, and within it is the potential for some truly catastrophic decision-making. For example, if it goes through, we will not, as landowners, if you happen to own a garden and you're a landowner, be able to tell someone who wants to frack not to go under your land. It's no longer called trespassing. If an animal becomes extinct in the British Isles, and be that a beaver that went extinct a few hundred years ago as a consequence of human beings, or be it a bird that goes extinct next week because of the way we're behaving, it will be regarded as a non-native species and therefore subject to all of the controls that implies, i.e. eradication, generally speaking. And these are all movements that are forced through, or rather insidiously slipped under the radar through interest groups and lobby groups who have the ear of the government. And I'm not saying that's particularly party political. I think there's an inference that there is. But I do think that there's a tremendous amount that, Rob was referring to it earlier, that we can all do. I'm not suggesting that any of us here are apathetic, but it is such hard work to find out what is going on. But it is our duty as voting citizens to do precisely that. And just to not address, but to refer to the question that came earlier, what can we do? I think one of the things is not to listen to people who only refer to short-termism, broadly speaking, because that's precisely what's happening now. As we start seeing people jumping on a green bandwagon, it's the same people who were trotting around the Antarctic about 5 years ago, not wearing a bubble hat because it didn't make a good photo op, saying that they were going to be the greenest government ever. Ha.
Okay. You've got one there, and yeah, this chap's had his hand up for a long time, in the purple shirt. Behind you, left, yes. No, that's it. 1 o'clock. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to add to what people are saying, to mention two things. First of all, TTIP. Does everyone know what that is? Because that's perhaps you can tell them what that is, John. The other thing is that there's a website called...
Hold up. I'm in trouble, so why don't you tell us what it is?
I don't know what the Transatlantic Trade International Partnership. At the moment, 28 EU trade commissioners are meeting in Brussels to hammer this out secretly. Some of them are so appalled by the documents they're receiving that they're leaking them. And basically what it means is that the 9 transnational companies, or maybe there's a few more, G4S, Serco, Sodexo, etc., will have the right to sue governments who interfere with their profit making. And they're already suing in Australia.
I've got an expert down here, so I'm actually, because I don't think anyone on the panel is...
Can I just add one more thing? Because
in green.
To tie in with what the man there was saying, Social Democracy is a website which gives you the parliamentarians with direct financial links to all these companies.
Shall it be Mr. or Mrs.? Is it going to be you or the other guy?
Basically, it's an international trade agreement between America and the EU, whereby America will be able to import any products within the EU and sell them, which I'm not explaining well, Steve.
The economic imperative overrides any environmental or protection terms for the environment, and that corporations have an inherent right to maximise their profit. So anything a government might do, I think this happened in Scandinavia somewhere, a government may say, no, we don't want your nuclear power plant, and they'll say, well, I'm sorry, but we need to put one there to maximise our profit, and that's what you signed up to. And if the government says we're not having it, then there are very large penalties the government has to pay.
Very interesting. Yeah, would you like to carry on? We've got a full educational class going on here.
I'm sorry, I don't know the details of this, but there's something about the legal aspects of it will be on offshore, right. and they won't come under any other jurisdictions.
It has a great affinity with of course, the country that brought us the concept of allowing a corporation to have the identity of a person, which of course has unleashed the most appalling funding cascade of filth into American political parties, and has made has created the logjam in Congress and rendered America ungovernable, which is a remarkable achievement. Remarkable achievement. And if they're going to do that to European-American trade, well, that's clearly a very stimulating development. GM chickens. Anything from America can come into the country with GM and the rest of it. Go for it, purple shirt. You've been a patient man.
Thank you very much. I come from Bogota, Colombia, so probably I'm the only foreign person here around. So,
no.
But anyway,
how many foreign persons are there here? You see, there's at least 3 others.
Okay, I don't feel alone anymore. So basically, I'm concerned about a topic. In Colombia is probably the second country in biodiversity in the world, but it's also in the first 5 countries in deforestation in the world. And approximately 70% of the deforestation comes from animal products industry. And I think that the data is a little bit similar around the world. And what I've seen, I've read a lot of information about this is like the main thing in deforestation and animal torture and lots of things. But environmentally, it's a very delicate situation, and I don't feel it in the debate. When I see campaigns, when I see people talking about it, I don't see it's a main topic, and I feel it's like huge, the consumption of animal products. I'm vegan, and with a group of friends in Colombia, we're starting a campaign to try to reduce at least a little bit the consumption of animal products. So do you want to say something?
Very good indeed. Best question of the morning. Because in the end, it confronts us with that real challenge of a question, which is, should we drastically cut down on meat?
Absolutely, undoubtedly. We all have to eat less meat. There's no doubt about it.
It's not even good for us.
Well, not necessarily, not bad for us, but it also depends how it's. Yeah, but you produce methane gas. You know,
I know I do, but I'm controlled about its emission.
It seems really unfair to me.
I'm controlled about its emission. They are not. Cows are not. They're doing it all the time. They fart all the time.
They do.
It's official.
But it also it depends on how we produce our meat and where we're producing it. So we absolutely must not be feeding our cattle on maize, on corn. We absolutely we should be trying to eat as much wild meat as possible. We shoot a lot of rabbits that just get dumped every year, which is quite extraordinary. If we were wilding more land, we'd be producing plenty more wild meat that we could be eating in a very ethical way. But we do need to produce less meat. There's absolutely no, we need to eat less meat. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Eat more vegetables, and why not? But there's a whole education in how we learn how to cook vegetables, again, relearn it, which is quite intimidating. I mean, so if we went into schools, that we would have an effect in a generation or two, and we are beginning to, but we all need to learn how to eat Jerusalem artichokes through the winter, which would contribute to our gas emissions.
Dale.
Yeah, thanks. I think the biggest thing we can all do on the food front is actually to stop eating meat and dairy products. It has a huge effect on the environment, and there is so much scientific evidence that it's bad for people as well. This is not just about methane emissions, this is about cancer, prostate, bowel, breast cancer, all sorts of bad things. It's literally killing us, and there are 1 billion animals killed a year in Britain to feed our population. These are land animals, birds and mammals, not fish, doesn't include fish. That's 20 million a week. It's an incredible number of animals abused during their short lifetimes and then killed to be eaten. We just have to stop doing it. It's simple as that.
But I think the perspective that our Colombian gave us is that of living in a country where deforestation to provide land for meat is an absolute disaster, as it is in Brazil. I mean, Brazil has been consumed by people trying to grow either food for animals for us to eat or actual animals themselves. Right, yes.
Just a little on that.
Quick one, because there's a lot of...
I'm not vegan. My love for the natural world includes, from time to time, eating some of them. And that, I'm not saying that with any sense of pride, but I am saying it with a sense of sustainability. Because there are opportunities, and one of them, in fact, you mentioned rewilding, was a very good example of how land can yield protein, not just for the natural world, but including us, as I say, in that equation, in a sustainable fashion. What is not sustainable is eating 3 different species a day at the level we currently do, and that's certainly not sustainable is feeding those animals the very food that could support us with protein. It takes about 3 times more protein to produce an animal that we end up eating than it does to eat that protein in the first place ourselves. So it is simply not sustainable in the current fashion. Now, it is unfashionable to say you shouldn't have things, but it was perfectly normal. If we go back to the post-war situation where one house-reared chicken fed a family for a week because that was the animal protein, that was a reasonably sustainable system. There's an ethical question, which of course is a different debate altogether. But as far as the sustainability and the impact on places like Colombia and others, where we are raping natural resources simply to satisfy our lust for animal protein, is unsustainable and unforgivable. Absolutely.
How many people here eat meat more than twice a week? That's a lot, isn't it? How many people eat meat more than 3 times a week? Roughly about the same lot. That's very interesting. Very good. Very interesting. Right, they've got one there, and then man in pink shirt with hat. Hand high. Just keep it as high as possible, Mr. Man in pink shirt. And the woman with the orange next to him. So those two, and then on this side, I think he was so good the first time round. We'll have Watto once more down here. But it's nothing to do with computing. No, good. Okay, these two first. And then Watto. Yeah.
Okay. My question's for Dale, and in the Green movement, I often see there's quite a lot of anti-capitalist sentiment, but I've been watching the rise of Ecotricity with great interest, and I wish there were more companies like that. One of the things is perhaps it's not run by a bunch of anonymous shareholders, and that's probably why we can engage with it. I was wondering, as Ecotricity does continue to succeed, how you, whether that worries you that Ecotricity will become so big and the nature of the thing will change.
Very good. I'm going to pause because we'll take a collection because there's so many who want to. Could you try and make it to Pink Man now without a hat? Yes, and yours next.
Yeah, I had to take the hat off. Yeah, I'd like to ask about the thing about individual consumers and politics again. And as an example of this, I teach in a school which is now completely covered in solar panels. Fantastic. Paid for by EDF, by the way, but anyway. But at the same time, the question is, why isn't every school in the country, why isn't every public building covered in solar panels? It's a complete waste. But I think also there's a wider political issues as well, because if we're talking about being socially sustainable, it means wider issues of peace and justice. So, for example, our government is selling millions of pounds of weapons to Israel to go and kill Palestinians in Gaza. And incidentally, I'd like to thank John for his reports from Gaza, because I thought they were fantastic. And my point is that I think politics and the individual aren't necessarily in conflict, because individuals can boycott Israeli goods until the Israeli government comes to heel and actually starts to negotiate properly. But also I think it's about our government actually taking action in favour of the Palestinians and for a proper Palestinian state.
Well, that was a very elegant, organic Z-bend, I think we could call it. And then finally the lady in orange, and then Watto, you'll wait for the next round, but you'll be first. Yeah.
Okay, I promise you I don't know this man, but there's a very similar theme on the link between the environment and human rights. And I have a question directly for Ecotricity in relation to your contract with G4S for the meter reading. Whilst Israel is bombing and murdering people in Gaza, they're imprisoning thousands of Palestinians, they're holding children in their prisons. G4S is running those prisons, imprisoning those children and running the checkpoints. I would like to ask Ecotricity when you are going to end your contract with G4S, which has such an appalling human rights record.
Well, Dale, I thought you were going to have an absolute free run today, but your feet are being put to the fire.
That one first?
I guess maybe.
Yeah, I think that one first.
And then what happens, it really comes, it's so large that you will be bigger than G4S.
Yeah. Well, look, first little bit of historical context. G4S took over the company that were doing the meter reading for us a long time ago. We didn't choose them. They're were at the time the only company to offer a national meter reading service. There are others have come along in the last couple of years. We've been troubled by some of the things that G4S have done and have alleged to have done. And we began the transition away from G4S probably about 6 months ago. We've switched meter reading in the biggest region of the country for us by customers, the southern region, as a trial for a new supplier, and we're rolling out across the country. So the answer to your question is it's already begun.
The other question was, what about what happens when you get very big?
Oh yeah, I think the question was, do I worry about it? Yeah. Actually, no, I don't. We have a kind of a mission-led approach. We don't answer to shareholders. We're driven by the outcome that we're looking for. It's all about sustainability for us. So we put all of the money that we make back into our mission. We don't pay shareholders or investors, venture capitalists, people like that. And it's our great strength that comes from this because it gives us complete independence from anybody else's opinion, any investor's opinion or shareholder's opinion about the things that we choose to do. So we can choose to put our money in things that have no immediate return or that have no prospect of a return, but they're the things that we believe in. Our model works really well. We've scaled from really literally one person, that was me. We had 500 people by September this year. And, I think within 5 years we'll probably be supplying 500,000 homes in Britain, which would be a major place to be. And the bigger we get, the more influence we have with competitors in the energy market, whether it's the big six or the small independents, and the more influence with the media and the government and all that kind of stuff. So actually size is a useful thing, and it holds no fear for us in terms of our model because our model is very strong.
Very good. The first question of the next round is 12-year-old Watto's second burst. What's your real name, Watto?
Oliver Killane.
Oliver Clay is going to ask his
Killane.
I like it. Keep going. Right, now, your next question.
I'm going to tell you about something. Meat eaters and people who would like to almost be good to the environment will like this. I've got two things. One is Soylent. Who's heard of Soylent?
Yeah, lots of them, at least 8.
Yeah. As far as I know, Soylent is basically some cool people have had an idea of saying, what if you got some powder, put in some liquid, and that was all your nutrients for a day? And you drank that, and no extra fats, none of that. That was all your nutrients. That could help, as in, do we really need to spend all that money on buying oil to tractors or electric tractors to basically harvest crops when we could just do that? But yeah, there's a few questions about that which I'm not sure about. Okay. Anyhow, thing number 2, the burger that could save the world. That sounds a bit weird, but yes. Some scientists have put together an idea of, could we grow a burger? Just saying. Anyhow, basically what they've done is they've got few cells, they put it in a burger-shaped pot almost. This is only the meat of it. And they've managed to create a growing, almost like a plant, growing burger. Basically, they put in the cells, they put in the ingredients for life. It grows over a few days, and there you have it, the meat.
Okay.
It was tested, and it was amazing, but it was slightly dry.
Okay, it sounds very much like McDonald's. I think they've already been there. They're very good. Thank you very much indeed. Right, there's a whole forest of hands. Where is Helen? You start over here, wherever you are. Yeah.
Hello, I just want to address fracking, because at the moment they're only doing experimental drilling around the country, but they've got plans for 70,000 wells in this country, all over, 64% of this country, all your country lands, everywhere. If you don't stop this, all your green issues they're just going to walk all over you. You've got to find a way to stop this. This is just going to come through like a juggernaut if you don't stand up and get it started now.
Yeah. Dale would like to chip in on fracking.
Yeah, I think what's happening is hideous, actually, and if you compare it to how the government are behaving with renewable energy, it's really hard to understand, because every opinion poll shows the majority of people in our country don't want fracking, but the government are doing everything to force it on us, changing the planning system, changing trespass laws, creating what they call the world's most generous tax system for frackers, and in contrast, shutting down the wind and solar industries, as fast as they possibly can. We made our green gas frack free probably 12 or 18 months ago. We hoped we might start a bit of a boycott movement if other energy companies followed suit. We've found a way to audit the gas composition of our gas, which is fossil fuel gas at the moment. It's only about 2% green. And so our promise is that there'll never be frack gas in our gas, so that people can kind of vote with their energy bills or protest from their couch. And at the same time, we invest the proceeds of our gas bills into building what we call green gas mills. These are places where we can make gas and we can put it into the grid. It's a perfectly viable way for us to power our country with gas made from organic material in this country. So for me, the answer to fracking is to crack on with building our own renewable gas.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want anything on fracking? Yes, Simon.
I would simply say that, of course, we all know the insidious dangers, but the one that I find most terrifying is the net effect on our aquifers, on our waterways. That we have, regardless of all of the propaganda fed to us on a daily basis, simply nobody knows. And as somebody who's lucky enough to live in a place where we have our own unique water source that bubbles up from, frankly, nobody knows where, because even the local water authority is bamboozled by the lack of nitrates in our source. They don't know where it comes from. To then profess that they know exactly what's going to happen when they drill down several hundred feet and plough through it and then treat it under high pressure is complete lies, nothing but lies. And it's right that we should all stand up and say, not on my patch, not on my watch.
There's another one there. What I'd like to do is to take one, and then the ivy leaf that's behind you with the dark vest on. Keep your hand up there, my dear. And then there's a rather nice, vivid, very extreme green with a straw hat. Yes, that one there. 1, 2, 3. Extreme green. Very nice. So let's go in that 3 order. 1 with the brolly.
I'd like to ask if anyone here has not heard of the law of ecocide. A lawyer from Scotland is proposing on an international level, on a European level, but more importantly for us on a UK level, to introduce the law of ecocide, which will stop in its tracks the International Trade Partner Agreement, because it's a law then that says, no, we have the right to protect our environment and money doesn't matter. On a bigger question, though, I want to know if we are going to shift from capitalism into sustainabilism, is anyone else concerned that the big money people that seem to be a family around the world almost, all interconnected, whether they're not going to put their foot down and stop that from happening in the most vile, horrible way imaginable?
Thank you very much. Let's take Ivy Leaf next. Yeah.
Hello, I'm going back a bit in the discussion. Simon mentioned the intrinsic value of nature. Where I live, we had a lot of housing developments coming in recently, and something like the intrinsic value doesn't stand up in planning inspectorate terms. So I'd like to put that out to everybody. How can we get something like an intrinsic value to be recognised scientifically, that there is an accepted argument in planning terms. I've also been hijacked by a Green Party person here who says if everybody here joined the Green Party, then there would be much more power behind it. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, sorry, typical politician. Actually, the Green Party will only get its shit together if everybody joins it, because it doesn't get funded by businesses. It hasn't got a big multi-million sponsoring them like UKIP does. So it relies on everybody to join it. So if you all join, the Green Party will get its shit together. And I asked the panel, are you members of the Green Party? So join us and we will change the world. Thank you.
Right. I will come then finally, not now, but in the beginning of the next round, which will probably be more or less the last, to Vivid Green. So if you want to get it down to her there, and we're going to take not guilty in the meantime. Vivid Green is in white with a white hat. There, she's got both arms up. That's it. She looks interesting. Right. Yes. How about capitalism, sustainabilism, and the big money boys?
I'd like to say something about that. I think I would call myself a sustainable capitalist, and I think there's a lot to be said for how business can change the world. So capitalism can have a very positive effect. I would say that Ecotricity, it would be along the same lines, and there are plenty of businesses out there that are being incredibly effective. And that from what Dale was talking about earlier with the growth of business, big business isn't necessarily bad. It can be a really, really great thing and be very, very effective.
Didn't you sense that the questioner was actually talking about banking?
Well,
I mean, I think the problem for the big money people, it's not the Unilevers, etc., who really are moving towards sustainability and the rest of it. It's the bankers, and there's going to be another crash. There will be another explosion because nothing has changed. No. Nothing at all. It's all mythical. It's all built on
and we've
nothing.
Lost the co-op as well, which was such a tragedy.
So I have a feeling that if it happens again, the cry for sustainability will be absolutely massive. It won't be the end of capitalism. It just get more rational capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And a killing off of the white boys and girls.
Can I refer to this?
Yes, sorry. Far away.
Just to refer to, it's all these questions are beautifully interlinked, and the value one places, talking of intrinsic value on the natural world, of course, has been put into pounds and pence terms recently. I referred to the phrase ecosystem services earlier, which is now bandied about by a great deal. And whilst I find the root moral of it abhorrent, it does get conversations going. Now, I'm sure many of you have read Tony Juniper's book, What Has Nature Ever Done For Us? If you haven't, you should. Subtitle, and I've got no shares in this, by the way, subtitle, Why Money Really Does Grow on Trees, because it's a very succinct overview of the very real cost of neglecting natural services, natural systems. Not least, and we're not simply talking about the demise of vultures in India, which is a beautiful example where vultures were killed through having been poisoned through various dips, resulting in carcasses lying around, resulting in feral dogs eating them, resulting in an upsurge of rabies in humanity. So you suddenly see systems collapse. And you can show this in real pounds and pence terms. You can show that taking a tree down in a city results in higher cost in terms of air conditioning a building and all of the knock-on effects. So if one has to put it into straightforward economic commercial terms, it's of course entirely possible. What I suppose my mantra, my banging the table, is to say, and over and above all of that, there is something more. There is the very thing that the gentleman in the attractive hat in front of me was referring to as spirituality, whatever you want to call it. It is the value of life all around. So I think that they do go hand in glove, and only through exposure are people going to notice. But perhaps they'll only notice in the first place when it costs a lot, through health or any other reason.
Two questions then. We'll take not guilty, followed by Vivid Green, and then turquoise. Where are you? Go for it.
Hello, my name is Amma Menek. I'm a wildlife sculptor. As you can tell from my T-shirt, I'm a fully signed up badgerista. I spent a lot of time in Somerset last year trying to stop the badger cull. I run a badger vaccination scheme in Devon, covering the whole of Devon. I also led the Great Badger Trail from Gloucester to London a couple of months ago. I just wanted to point out something that most of the public isn't aware of in terms of the politics of ecology, and that is the pernicious influence of the NFU. It's not getting discussed much, but I found that when a vote was held in Devon whether to allow a badger cull on council-owned land, at least 50% of the councillors, that's people paid to do their job, were actually representing the views of the NFU over their constituents. Also, a lot of people don't realise that the NFU was set up back in the Second World War to help prevent, help to give a voice to the countryside in government during a time of political upheaval, obviously, a time of national crisis. But instead of that, these days, it's actually creating a crisis by insisting on such things as an unscientific, unjustifiable, and criminally expensive badger cull. And a lot of people don't realise that they are an unelected quango. None of us here voted for the NFU to have these policies that they have. Their offices are right next door to DEFRA. They have interconnecting doors. They have absolutely unlimited access to power. And yet they're not voted for, they're not elected. Right. And also the other thing about the NFU is, although it calls itself a National Farmers Union, only a fifth, in fact less than a fifth of British farmers are members of it. And it largely represents large agribusiness, which in terms of organic gardening and farming and the rest, is really very pernicious.
The time has beaten us, and okay. Our only reassuring factor about the NFU is that every time they've ever tried it as a bit of a storyline in the Archers, it's come to grief. And let us end, therefore, with Vivid Green, who gets dress of the afternoon, and hopefully, and even hat. And question, please.
Hi, it's not really a question, it's just an observation that I think if we're going to move forward, we need to be really inclusive of all people. That's one thing. And I think about all the people I know who have very little money, and there's a lot of myths about green being very middle class, and you can only buy at a farmer's market if you've got a lot of money, etc., etc. And those things need to be busted, really, those myths. The other thing is, I think, example. And I think, again, I'm going to give a plug for Ecotricity, in that Dale has, sat there and said, somebody's put a big question to him, which is quite challenging, and he was able to answer it. So there's integrity there. And I think our businesses and the things we work with need to have integrity. And if they don't have integrity, don't bother being involved with them. And let's go forward in a positive way. Never mind all the rubbish and negative stuff that's happening. Let's bring in the new, bring in the positive, get forward so that those things just die away because we don't need them anymore.
Thank you very much. An uplifting ending to our questioning. And when I asked, is she an employee, I was immediately told, no. And that's because Ecotricity is so small, they know who all their employees are. Anybody want to last 10, 15 seconds each?
There was something I wanted to say earlier on, really, about the big corporations, and the big corporations who are specifically involved in getting more control, as the laws you were explaining, and the fossil fuel extractors and all those companies. The only hope we can get from that is that they are, in historical terms, utterly, utterly doomed to catastrophic failure. And I think we need to remember that. You cannot keep doing what they're doing. It doesn't work. They are wrong. They will lie about it. Don't believe them. Tell everyone you know, these guys are lying, and they're going to end. But I mean, it's going to shit on us for many years before they are ending. But it's a very important thing to remember.
Perhaps on a slightly smaller scale, but echoing what was the lady with the badger T-shirt referred to about how we are represented. I am so sad and disappointed by what I see so frequently referred to as the people of the countryside. I am a person of the countryside. I imagine many of the people in front of me here are people of the countryside. I am not represented by the voice that wants to beat it into submission. 95.8 million people live in rural England. I don't know about the rest of the British Isles, of whom 170,000 are farmers, of whom those are represented by 55,000 members of the NFU. We, the bigger percentage, the 95.5 million people, should be speaking and should make our voices heard, because otherwise we're going to be walked on by big industry. Simple as that.
Thank you very much. Geetie?
Every penny you spend is a political act. Just think about every time you spend money, make the right choice. Spend it with the right people. It's an agricultural act. Don't ever spend a penny without thinking it through first.
Dale?
Yeah, I agree with that. Whatever you're spending your money on, energy, transport or food, it's your choice, and you choose which way the world goes round. We all do. Also, I agree with what Robert says. We are at the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era, and the great acts of vandalism that go on around the world now have been fueled literally by this cheap, abundant form of energy, which is coming to an end, and so it has to stop. It's just a question of when and how that it all comes to an end. So, I mean, that for me is a great message of hope. And that's it.
We have 1 minute past 12, but there is one more child, and I never like to reject a child. Somebody get the mic, if you could, just to the rather nicely dressed character here with her hand up, 2 hands up. She's down there on the corner. We cannot pass by without hearing what the generation we are supposed to be protecting.
Well, I just want to talk about the urban wildlife around our towns and cities, because we're not protecting it as well as we all hope. And I just like to say I think we should build little hedgehog homes, feed the birds with bread crusts, and just protect everything in our area.
Very, very good. I've got a little place for our fox. It's called my dustbin. Right. Well, on your behalf, I'd like to thank our 4 panelists, Robert, Simon, Dale, Geetie, very, very warmly. It's been a really, really interesting and organic debate, going off in all sorts of different directions, but really with one unity. And thank you very much indeed for making it the event it was. Thank you.